Hello friends and welcome to my top 5 best soft supports in Dota 2 right now, and an informal tier list for the rest of them, which again you can move them up and down a little bit. We're mainly here to talk about the top 5 and some honorable mentions. If you want to know the hard support tier list / top 5 I've got, check out last week's video. Let's start by talking about the meta of the soft supports right now. It is similar to the 5 role right now, where you prefer strong laning presence and early active gameplay, but the way 4s go about that can be a little different, because they have more options due to the differences in the map and what heroes they're playing with. Off laners are stronger and they can typically be left alone. That's not always true, but let's just go with that for now. So the 4 role has more freedom to roam about, and especially go help the mid lane with the water runes and the power runes. Now, if they're going to roam over, they want to be able to do something and potentially get a mid kill. And if they're slow heroes, that means they spend a lot of time just walking through the jungle, and that's not very threatening, because the longer a hero's missing, the more obvious it becomes they might be trying to do something, and while you're just walking around, you're not actually getting golden XP, and you're falling behind. So 4 heroes tend to be faster. Either they buy boots and wind laces really quickly, or they just have natural movement speed, or have some kind of gap closing or long range ability, which they can initiate with when they get to the mid lane if an opportunity is there. And that's kind of the follow-up. Like, they need some kind of stun or slow or something to do, not just like a pure damage hero, because that can kind of work sometimes, but usually like the mid laner just walks away before you can get your damage in, and then it doesn't look very good. Now, going back to the strong laning, heroes that are good at what we just talked about tend to actually be weak laners. And that is okay for the 4 role, because you can just creep drag. You go and meet the creeps behind the enemy safe lane tower, and you bring it around either in front of your tower or behind your tower. There's all sorts of like little gimmicks about that you can do, and honestly, you probably won't do it in your pubs too often, because creep dragging is not that popular in pub games, but that's why you'll see it in the pro scene. These heroes who, even though they're weak laners, they get around it by dragging the wave and kind of get an even lane at worst. And then, while they're kind of doing those shenanigans, they are then using the golden XP they're getting to go roam quickly and effectively into the mid lane. And that is how they contribute to, maybe we're not strong laners, but we're circumventing the enemy's strong lane by creep dragging. And then we are part of the early active gameplay by providing that early initiation typically, and then scaling up with that as well. Number 5 on our list is actually Mirana again. So she was more traditionally a 4. I won't repeat too much about her because I covered it in the hard support video, but I do want to talk about the differences between 4 Mirana and 5 Mirana. 1, you're more likely to start with Sacred Arrow. There's a couple reasons for this. 1, you can fire at the ranged creep to secure it. That shoves in your lane, and that's not as big of a deal for the off lane versus the carry lane, where you're like shoving it out to the enemy's tower. You don't want to do that. So 4 Mirana can do this a little better. She uses that arrow to play aggressive, potentially, because many offlaners are frequently more aggressive than the carries. That's actually not fully the case right now, like we talked about in the last video, but having arrow at level 1 tends to work out a little better than if you're starting in the 5 position, because more carries are passive, whereas more offlaners tend to be aggressive. Plus, since 4 Mirana is going to be doing that roaming we talked about, it's good if you have arrow to shoot at the mid lane and potentially hit that mid hero. And if you don't go for that opportunity, as you're walking between the jungle camps, arrow is an instant kill on creeps, which means even if the opportunity isn't there, you can then farm a little bit on the enemy's half of the map, getting some golden XP while you are doing this roaming, which we mentioned earlier is the biggest weakness, right? Getting no golden XP, not an issue for Mirana if she has arrow level 1. 5 Mirana won't have those same opportunities, so she doesn't quite need arrow. If you were to take arrow at level 4 as a soft support Mirana, you're probably missing the first couple water runes, probably even the power rune, so then you're roaming without that stun, and that feels kind of weird. So you're a lot more likely to see Sacred Arrow start with the 4 position Mirana. From there, it's kind of the same. You're probably going to get more gold as position 4 Mirana, but your itemization is still going to be very flexible and just fit whatever your team needs, but maybe slightly higher level and slightly more gold. 4th on our list is going to be Earthshaker. He provides some of the most lockdown you could possibly pick in a hero, having a stun on every ability, and that allows him to initiate and chain stun heroes and buy time for other heroes to come up and chain stun, or just kill them in that time. Fissure is a very long range, reliable stun, plus even when the stun ends, you can't walk through Fissure, so you can either keep people out of the fight or keep people in the fight, depending how you're using your Fissure. Your ultimate is instant, So there's technically some time if you like blink and then press ult that people can react, but it's really hard. So it's essentially an instant initiation that could also be a massive team fight impact due to the way it scales in its damage. Not always guaranteed, sometimes you just use it for the initiation, but you have that option. So when it comes to initiating and starting fights, counter-initiating, Earthshaker is one of the best. Having said that, he does have a weakness, and that is his laning stage and the ramp up period. So in the lane, he doesn't offer that much, even though people are doing a different build than they used to. People used to just start boots and roam a lot, and nowadays they're actually getting more stats, mangoes, things like that, leveling totem a little faster, and then just trying to like play out the lane using totem for extra damage to secure creeps and fight over things, because that's how important the laning stage is. But if you don't want to play that way, Earthshaker has some unique ways to avoid the laning stage, using Fissure to block his own creeps or sometimes the enemy creeps and kind of control equilibrium that way. Either block the enemy creeps so that his creeps die really quickly to the tower and it shoves back out to his side, or blocking his own creeps so that the lane just initially meets near his own tower. He also, if he doesn't want to do that stats build, can just get boots and then creep drag, and then with those boots, he's a very fast roamer to the mid lane, so we can help get those water runes, block the mid laner from the left or the right, you know, all that stuff we just talked about, ganking potential. So he's getting by his laning stage and then offers a lot. After the laning stage, he does have some time where he typically tries to get a blink. That can be hard because he doesn't have the best farming tools, and blink is a little bit expensive. Nowadays, if you're having a really bad game, you can get a shard because you can fissure, which is really long range, and the shard allows any ability you cast to then do another stun along the fissure. So when you're having a really bad game, you can go to that, and that has helped him have more consistent performance, whether he's having a great game, fast blink, or a bad game, shard as like this pseudo backup blink, giving him more options, more consistency, but ideally, most of the time you do want to blink, so you can do that blink ult as a huge team fight impact. Next on our list is Tusk, who has a lot of unique utility. That's one of the reasons he's so great. He does have a bit of a high skill ceiling because there's a lot of like little finicky things with his abilities, which I've always like joked around like Tusk, you either get commended or reported. Not to scare you away from playing him, but you can mess up your abilities and kind of like screw your team over, but when you work everything out, it is incredible. And that's kind of why pros make such good use of Tusk. Pub games, you know, it might take some practice, but he does offer a lot. So tag team in the laning stage is lots of damage for you and your allies next to you. So you kind of have to wait for the right moment, but when you decide to go, you pop tag team and you both start just hitting a single target and they take a ton of damage. You then use ice shards or snowball to buy more time to keep doing that, and there you go, you got a kill. You can switch that order around because ice shards is a long range ability that blocks a like, you know, it's that little U shape, and people who are on the inside can't get out, people on the outside can't get in. Snowball is your gap closer, so there's all different ways you can initiate. You can start with the shards, close in, you can like snowball in, shards trap them, you can just walk up tag team, then shard snowball as you need. You know, there's so many choices and options there for whatever the situation calls for. When you go roam, you just bring that whole toolkit with you to the mid lane. You can ice shard block the mid hero so that you guys can kill him or keep him away from a rune. You can snowball gap close, so even if he sees you coming, doesn't matter, you just roll on through and get him, and then you pop tag team, your mid laner is there getting that bonus damage. So he has a strong lane into that roaming potential. Once you hit level 6, you get Walrus Punch, and although I'm sure you've all been one shot by Walrus Punch before, that's more of a core Tusk thing. Support Tusk cares about the BKB piercing stun. So right now many cores are building BKBs pretty early, which as I finish the sentence I realize maybe is not happening in your games depending on the bracket, but if it happens, I swear this is a lot of value that they want to do whatever they want to do when they pop BKB, whether that's TP out or start killing people. They hate being disrupted at all, no matter how long that duration is. So although Walrus Punch, not a massive stun at 1 second, it is still a stun through BKB, and at a very low cooldown. So you can blink, initiate, punch someone, snowball them, back off, and then the enemy cores come in with their BKBs, and you come back in and you punch them, and then you back off, and they're like, oh, I hated that. And then they're trying to get away, and you come back in and you punch them again, because this punch is really low cooldown. So you get to use it multiple times in a single fight. He has other cool aspects to his abilities as well, which I won't cover them all because Tusk is a really complicated hero, But because Snowball makes you invulnerable and your teammates, which you pick up and stay in the Snowball, you can use that as a save. You can also waste enemy cores BKB time by Snowball holding your teammates in there while BKB just ticks down. You can use ice shards to lock off BKB targets because even though they don't take damage, they can't walk through shards. So you just block them off from the fight and they have to spend time just walking around. They hate that. You buy an Axe, you just like kick people out of the fight, and that works as a like disengage tool or as a initiation tool. So you're both kind of like standing like, ooh, we're over here, you're over there, and then Tusk just suddenly blinks in and kicks someone into his team, right? And they delete that hero. And Tusk, although he's alone in the enemy's team surrounded by them, he just snowballs and buys himself some time for his enemies or for his teammates to kill whoever he just kicked in and then go help him. So there's tons of stuff you can do with Tusk. I couldn't possibly cover it all or find examples of all of them, but very high skilling, lots of potential impact, but difficult to, do it all. It takes practice. Second on our list is going to be Riki. I think he is an incredible support right now, and the biggest issue to him is getting your team to not tilt out when you pick Riki support. And admittedly, the first 15 minutes, it's not amazing as Riki. It's fairly weak. But once you hit 15 and you pick up that shard, your impact is insane. Sleeping Dart is busted right now. I don't want to repeat myself too much because I actually already made a video on Riki support. You can check it out if you want to know more details. But just to give you the quick rundown for this video, his Sleeping Dart plus Smokescreen combo is tons of utility in a team fight and just general pickoffs because you are permanently invis, so you have lots of scouting, you plant the wards, you find the right targets, Sleeping Dart into Smokescreen, and your team just get to follow up. Very low cooldown, so you are pretty much constantly online, very difficult to counter because this initiation is coming out of invis, so many people just don't have the reaction time to prevent the Sleeping Dart, and then they're just stuck there until the rest of your team comes in with the stuns. So your biggest issue is the laning stage, but it's not the worst because you have pretty solid stats. So you get through the laning stage either by playing the lane or by creep dragging, and you're not invis at that point, so you can do it. You get past the laning stage, you get your shard, and then you are online, you are a hero, you're gonna have insane impact, and you get to scale potentially because Riki was a core, so if the game goes really long, you can go right-click items. So that's why Riki's number 2 to me. I think he is awesome in pub games. Just you gotta be a little careful of the tilt from teammates, but just like, guys, I promise, 15 minutes, we're good to go. Keep them hopeful until you get that point, and then you'll show them what Riki can do. And the best soft support right now, in my opinion, of course, is going to be Rubick, who placed number 2 in my top 5 hard supports list, so I'll try not to repeat myself too much, but I think he just fits the meta really well right now. He likes to play the laning stage with his good base stats, good attack range, just does lots of poking, uses Fade Bolt to secure creeps, do a lot of damage. If he shoves the lane, it's not really an issue for position 4 Rubick because it just dies to the tower and resets right in front. You can't put your offlaner like in a worse position, you can only put him into a better position. So it doesn't really matter as much that Fade Bolt is uncontrollable. If he does roam, he has Telekinesis and Fade Bolt to get something done. It's not maybe as good as some of the other initiations, but it's a mix of like stun plus damage, and that is like enough to work with. So whether he's laning or roaming in the early game, he's good to go. He picks up a fast level 6, hopefully, and then all these high impact spells that we're trying to pick in other core and support positions, the Grand Magus takes them and he makes them better. Better cast range, better damage, better debuff duration, better cooldown, right? He just takes whatever spell he thinks is best for the game and tries to use it to max efficiency. And because you're playing the soft support role, it's a little bit easier to be greedy and get the items you need to do this. So I think he just loves what's going on right now. A lot of the popular heroes all have great spells. The heroes that don't have such great spells, they're not so popular right now. So just pretty much every game tends to be a good Rubick game. Whether you're a 4 or a 5 player, I would just pick him all the time if you know how to play him, because that's actually probably his biggest weakness. He's not the easiest. Knowing which spells to steal, the positioning required for all that, the balance between being greedy but then not being too greedy, like that's the challenge with Rubick. So it does take a lot of practice. Even though he's the best, I don't think everyone can just start picking Rubick and play very well. So you do have to study up a little bit, but if you want to spend the time to learn Rubick, I think he's excellent right now. So that's the top 5. Honorable mentions, you could honestly take any of these and kind of swap them into like the 4 or 5 spot on this list, and I'd be like, yeah, that's pretty reasonable. I think a lot of these heroes are just very solid, and it kind of comes down to the draft, like who your core is, what your team is. Then yeah, maybe Clockwork's better, maybe Earth Spirit or Tiny's a little better. I think these heroes in the top 5 I've picked tend to fit pretty well in more lineups, but again, honestly, you want to put Hoodwink in here, totally fine with me. All these heroes fit the trend of what I talked about earlier, which is they either have a strong laning stage into early active game, or their laning stage is kind of they'll creep drag, but they have good roaming potential into early active gameplay. So I don't know. If you like any of these heroes, I think they're all solid. Just first pick them and you'll be good to go. Thank you for watching. I hope you found that helpful. If you want to see the hard support list, I will link it in the description, pop it up wherever. And I do have videos on some of these heroes already. I will link the relevant ones. And if I don't have videos on them quite yet, then I might make some in the near future. Let me know which ones you're interested in. And I will see you in maybe one of those. Bye.